Hi, I've clicked onto the Tropical Tidbit for Sunday evening, September 17th. As always, the thoughts in this video are mine alone, and in making decisions, heed the information from your local officials, the National Hurricane Center, and your local weather office. We'll start out with Hurricane Jose today. You can see the storm spinning away here as the sun sets between North Carolina and Bermuda. This is moving north, and we can see that it's still a little sheared. The southern side doesn't have a lot of convection here, and this is limiting intensification. You can see there's no clear eye showing up here, but this does remain a hurricane, and in fact a little stronger than a couple of days ago. The recon plane's in there right now. Pressure is 974, not a ton lower from yesterday, but the wind field has grown a little bit, and everything in purple here is at hurricane force at the level of the aircraft. So there's a rather large wind field here. Hurricane force winds do extend out to 60 miles in the northern side away from the center, and tropical storm force winds over 200 miles from the center. So this is a wide storm that will be able to bring impacts well away from its center position toward the U.S. coast, and that's the concern as this moves northward over the next few days. And during Monday and Tuesday, a close pass here to the eastern coast of the U.S. is anticipated. Far enough east that Cape Hatteras, not really expecting much here, but we do have tropical storm watches from Delaware through Cape Cod, and this area of the Mid-Atlantic and New England has the potential to see tropical storm force winds. That's what this watch means. And this is going to be occurring on Monday and Tuesday as the storm moves up and then gradually turns to the east. Again, this is moving slow, so it will have the opportunity to weaken. It is likely peaked now, and as it moves north, it will move into still sheer and then eventually colder water. The Gulf Stream boundary is right about here, so everything north of this line is really cold water, and you can see some of the stratus clouds up at the top of your screen indicating the stable air. You're not seeing any thunderstorms up here because of how cold the water is relative to what it is around the hurricane right now. So as this moves up, it's going to be making its pass, but it will be weakening as it does this, and it's not expected to be a huge problem unless the track wobbles left and the center comes closer to the coast, which is still possible. You can see that the cone of uncertainty does extend still pretty close to the coast, so be ready for any track shifts to the left. But given the current forecast, the potential for tropical storm conditions is there, but not hurricane conditions. Those are not expected at this point. However, this can be highly disruptive and could bring dangerous weather to those outdoors, and especially those at the beach. The beaches will not be safe for people in the water with rip currents, high surf, and choppy waters. So the beaches will definitely not be safe, and this kind of weather can become dangerous in the cities if you're near the coast. So do pay attention to what your local weather office is telling you about this system as it draws near, as this could be highly disruptive in some areas, especially if it gets close to areas like Massachusetts, Connecticut, and the Cape Cod area, as that will be the point of closest approach. But again, weakening will be occurring as it does this, and eventually it will start doing this clockwise loop toward the south, and it could hang around for a while to the south of New England, but as it pulls away here, the dangerous weather will pull away from the coast with it. And we'll talk more about Jose in a bit when we get to Maria. Here's a look at the probability of tropical storm force winds affecting land. You can see that the probability decreases away from the center track, which is something like this, but you can see the wide expanse to the northwest of the system where the chance of tropical storm force winds, that means about 40 miles per hour or higher, is possible here. The probability gets lower as you get farther away and farther inland, but you can see significant numbers here, 30% to 50% near the coast, and again highest at the point of closest approach here in the Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts area. And so again, significant potential for disruptive wind and heavy rainfall will be occurring here as well. Isolated flooding is possible. As we move on to Hurricane Maria now, this is indeed a hurricane. Just yesterday we were talking about this barely becoming a tropical system, and now we have a hurricane today. The quick intensification that we feared has occurred here and is continuing today. You can see from visible satellite before the sun went down. This last image is a few hours old before the sun went down, but you can see that the low-level center almost became exposed earlier in the day, but a burst of convection has fired over it this evening, and you can see these structured convective bursts beginning to curl around the center of circulation, usually a sign of intensification. If you look at the infrared shot, which is more up to date, because it works even when the sun is down. You can see this large area of thunderstorms has developed right on top of the center in the last several hours. Now, it's not always clear whether or not these bursts of convection are actually structured and mean that the storm is strengthening, but in this case it appears that it does, as the reconnaissance aircraft data shows that the pressure is falling well into the 980s, 983 millibar as of the last measurement. That is a sign of a very strong system with winds now at hurricane force, which is why the system was upgraded to a hurricane. And the microwave pass from just around 6 p.m. Atlantic time shows an inner core with a formative eye developing, eye wall about halfway around, and this is right under that ball of convection that you could see on the satellite here. So there is an eye developing under there. It hasn't cleared out, but it's a sign of intensification, and unfortunately the quick strengthening of Maria is coming to fruition as expected, and as this moves west-northwest, this is coming directly at areas from Guadeloupe, Dominica, and Martinique. This is likely to be the target zone for the system's center moving through the Lesser Antilles, although of course dangerous conditions extend well away from the eye, but the worst of the winds could be felt between Martinique and Guadeloupe. As the system moves west-northwest, we then get into threats for the rest of the Leeward Islands, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico, and that is coming pretty quick here. If we look at the forecast from the National Hurricane Center, this continues to strengthen. By the time it moves through the islands here, this could be a major hurricane. That means Category 3 winds of 115 miles an hour or stronger, and we start to worry about flooding issues as well as the wind here in the islands, as heavy rains can always cause mudslides and flash flooding. We have hurricane warnings north of Martinique, throughout portions of the western Leeward Islands, tropical storm warnings for Antigua-Barbuda, hurricane watches for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, and watches will likely be coming up for Puerto Rico and perhaps the Dominican Republic within the next day or so. And as this moves west-northwest, again, the track is very close to Puerto Rico here and the Virgin Islands, and this could be a direct hit for some of these places. Again, there's some wiggle room here. You can see the track shift a little to the left, a little to the right, north or south. It's always hard to tell. We're not going to be able to tell you whether it's going to move, a few dozen miles this way or that way, but be ready for a direct hit, because this is coming right through the islands, and somebody's going to get nailed by this storm, and it could be quite dangerous by the time it gets through the Lessers and moves more into the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico area, and then Hispaniola after that. This could be a very powerful hurricane and is expected to have winds well in excess of 100 miles an hour at that point. Of course, flooding, again, a big concern for places like Hispaniola and Puerto Rico, regardless of the wind, as mountainous terrain can cause mudslides and catastrophic rainfall totals with any kind of tropical system that moves through these areas. And then as this moves west-northwest, we're starting to get into the point now where the Day 5 forecast is near the Turks and Caicos and southeastern Bahamas again, in a similar location to where Hurricane Irma passed through. So unfortunately, new concerns for this region of the world, and folks should be starting to prepare for this storm and watching it very carefully as it comes toward this region. After this, things get much more murky, as they always do when we're talking about a long-range forecast beyond Day 5, and interest in the United States, this is not an imminent concern yet, but it's something that could become a concern later, and so we're going to be keeping an eye on it. This is the European Ensemble mean Day 5 forecast for Friday, showing the mid-levels of the atmosphere here. This would be where Maria is, assuming it passes just north of Hispaniola. This is roughly where it would be, and the pattern that we have here is a little bit of a complicated one. Again, similar to for Irma, this is a little more complex. We have a big ridge building over the northeastern U.S., but we also have a lingering trough sort of over Florida and the northeast Gulf of Mexico, and we also have Jose, which is now forecast to do a loop and sort of get trapped by this ridge, because this ridge builds over the top of Jose, keeping it here. So that's the old hurricane, almost dead by this point, but still there. And Maria is here. Now, this matters because if Jose is sticking around, it kind of leaves a weakness in the flow here, so this ridge cannot just build in. And if Jose wasn't there, you would have a much greater chance of forcing the hurricane toward the northwest with a ridge here. But since Jose is likely to be hanging out, you leave a weakness in the flow, so there's now an avenue toward the northeast that is left open for Maria, potentially. That's not a guarantee here, because a lot of this depends on exactly where Jose is, which has been changing. Models have had a hard time latching onto this loop very well. How much of Jose is left, because it's going to be over cold water, so how fast does it decay? And does it move far enough west that this ridge can actually still connect here? And if you actually get a ridge building in like this, and Jose gets out of the picture in time, it can direct the storm northwest toward the United States. So there's the potential for a threat to North America here, but it's highly uncertain. There is both a route out to sea or near Bermuda, and there are routes into the eastern seaboard and perhaps even farther west depending on the exact evolution. Again, questions that remain to be answered because this is a forecast for a week away. We simply don't know. But we're going to be watching the evolution of this pattern quite carefully as there are potential for threats to North America. So we'll keep an eye on this, but again, imminent threats are currently to the Lesser Antilles, specifically the Leeward Islands, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola over the next 3 to 5 days, and adverse conditions are already beginning to spread over portions of the islands, with Barbados already getting the outer bands, and preparations should be rushed to completion tonight and tomorrow morning in the northern Lesser Antilles, as dangerous conditions will arrive quite soon now. So do be prepared. Please stay safe, everyone. That's it for tonight. Thanks for watching.